Emma awoke with a jolt that night when thunder rumbled across the dark sky and lightning flashed outside the window, cutting through the darkness with a chilly, sharp brilliance. At the foot of the bed, Toby, her devoted collie, had sprung to his feet, ears pricked, and eyes fixed on the living room door as though he were waiting for something. She couldn't explain the uneasiness that sat heavy on her chest, her back sticky with cold perspiration seeping through her nightshirt. "Toby, what is it?" The eerie feeling prompted Emma to rise out of bed, her bare feet scuffing the cold wooden floor, while Toby gave out a low yelp, his tail wagging weakly but his stance rigid with awareness. Emma muttered with her voice, breaking the quiet of the night. She moved slowly in the direction of the living room, each step dragging through a spooky silence that seemed to last on forever. Emma froze when she opened the door. He didn't say anything at first, only gazed at her with an expression she had never seen before, an unnerving mixture of agony and hesitation. Jamie was standing there, soaking from the rain that pummeled down outside, his clothing clinging to him, his eyes darkened with a grief she couldn't identify. "Who are you?" Emma's voice was trembling a little as she asked, but her question was drowned out by another thunderclap that rolled across the sky. Toby padded over to Jamie, twirling around his legs as if to console him. Emma had never seen Jamie like this before, always the optimist exuded joy, but tonight it seemed like he had brought the storm into her small house. "Emma, I need to talk to you right now." Jamie's voice was almost breaking as he stepped inside his wet shoes, leaving damp trails on the floor. Emma didn't stop him, but her heartbeat grew faster with each step. He took Jamie. He didn't wait for her to answer before continuing his words, tumbling out in a hurry. He sank into the chair and ran a hand through his dripping wet hair, his eyes locking onto hers with a fierce intensity as if trying to etch his thoughts into her very soul. Emma stood frozen, her hands clutching her cardigan as if she understood what he was saying, but she didn't say anything. "I can't pretend that everything between us is just friendship. I need you to know this before it's too late." "Jamie, I don't think that we—" Emma stammered her words, faltering as Jamie broke his gaze, igniting with a mixture of frustration and raw emotion. "I don't need you to say anything right now, Emma. I just need you to know I've been in love with you for a long time. I can't hide it anymore." Toby jumped onto the couch and settled between them as if he were the last familiar thing in a moment that felt completely foreign, but even Toby's consoling presence couldn't ease the tension that hung heavy in the air. As if to remind her that this moment was real, this house, this friendship and this dog, who had always been there, Emma took a deep breath, her chest tightening at the weight of his confession. Outside, the storm howled against the house, but inside, the silence felt oppressive. Toby pushed her hand with his nose, but she couldn't get rid of the question, after tonight, would any of it remain the same? She lowered herself into the chair across from Jamie, her eyes darting between fear and something she didn't want to mention to Jamie. "I'm at a loss for words. I don't think I'm ready." Before she could finish, Jamie rose to his feet, his face a mix of sadness and resolve. "It's okay, Emma. I didn't come here to make you feel the same way. I just needed you to know, and whatever you decide, I'll still be here, but I need some time too to stop feeling like I'm just a friend." He turned toward the door, leaving Emma and Toby in a silence that felt deeper than the storm outside. Rain continued to drum against the roof as Emma watched his silhouette fade into the downpour, her heart churned with emotions she couldn't name, a knot tightening in her chest. For the first time, she realized that even Toby, with all his understanding and loyalty, couldn't answer the one question on her mind. Did she have the courage to cross that line, or would she lose Jamie forever? Emma sat quietly in the dimly lit room, with the soft yellow glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the walls outside. The rain continued to fall in a distant rhythm, a melancholic song that she couldn't escape. Toby lay curled at her feet, his small head resting gently on her lap as though to provide silent comfort. However, the storm inside Emma's heart was one that nothing, not even Toby's unwavering loyalty, could ease. Jamie's words played over and over in her mind like a broken record, stealing her breath with each replay. Emma reached for the journal on the shelf, the one she hadn't opened in months. Her fingers hesitated as she touched the worn cover, but eventually she flipped through the pages. The scrawled words on the paper carried fragments of her thoughts, secrets she had never spoken aloud, not even to Jamie, the one person she trusted more than anyone else in the world, but there in the middle of the journal, bold and unguarded, were the words that made her pause. "Jamie has always been the one who makes me feel safe, But is that love or just the comfort of a friend? Emma let out a heavy sigh, her eyes lingering on the lines as though searching for answers within them. Memories she had buried began to resurface, pulling her back to a time when Jamie had walked into her life like a steady light in the darkest of nights. It was a time when everything she believed in had been shattered. The man she had loved deeply, the one she had thought would be her forever, had betrayed her. He left her not only with a broken heart but also with a haunting sense of worthlessness. She had once thought that love was everything. She had invested all her trust, her hope, even her future into someone who in the end had only seen her as a temporary choice. When it all fell apart, Emma felt like a fragment of herself, a misplaced piece in the puzzle of someone else's life. And then there was Jamie. In those dark, uncertain days, he was the one who showed up without needing an invitation or offering empty words. He simply sat beside her on the old sofa, holding a cup of hot cocoa and letting the silence mend what words could not. Jamie never pushed her to talk or to heal faster than she was ready. He was simply there, a steady wall to lean on when she thought she couldn't stand it anymore. It was Jamie too, who had suggested she adopt Toby. A dog can make everything better, he had said with a smile, and Jamie had been right. Toby became her anchor, her constant, the one companion who would never leave or hurt her. But now, as Toby slept peacefully by her side, Emma realized it wasn't just Toby who had held her steady all this time. It had always been Jamie too. She thought back to the countless nights filled with laughter when Jamie would tell his ridiculous stories, doing anything to make her smile. She remembered the little things, the way he would bring her favorite snacks without her asking, or how he would let her vent about her work for hours without complaint. But beneath all of it there were those moments she couldn't forget, how his eyes lingered on her just a little longer than they should have, or how his voice would soften when he spoke her name. She had once brushed it off as her imagination, but now she wasn't so sure. Her gaze fell to the photo on the table. It was a snapshot from a summer day. The three of them, Emma, Jamie, and Toby, smiling brightly under the warm sun. Toby was just a puppy then, tripping over his own feet, and Jimmy had his arm casually slung over her shoulder. Looking at it now, Emma felt a pang in her chest. Jamie had never left her side, even when she didn't feel she deserved such steadfastness. But love, the thought sent a wave of uncertainty crashing over her. She didn't want to lose Jamie. He was the one person who understood her, who would never let her down. But what if crossing the line between friendship and love meant losing everything they had built together? What if they couldn't go back? The fear of the unknown loomed large, threatening to paralyze her. Emma sat frozen, staring out the window at the rain that still fell steadily. Part of she wanted to run after Jamie, to say something, anything that might keep him from slipping further away, but another, the part that carried the weight of her past heartbreaks and betrayals, held her back. She didn't know if she had the courage to trust love again, to take that leap and risk falling. The rain began to quiet, leaving only the faintest patter against the silence in the room grew heavy, broken only by Toby's soft breathing. He stirred, shifting his head to look up at her with those big understanding eyes, as if asking a silent question. And what about you, Emma? Will you do with your heart? The next morning sunlight seeped through the gaps in the curtains, but Emma felt no warmth. She woke with a heaviness in her chest, as if her heart was suspended between two extremes, fear and longing. Toby stood beside her bed, his tail wagging softly, his bright eyes urging her to get up and start the day. But Emma remained still, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the fragments of the night before. The sudden chime of the doorbell pulled her out of her thoughts. She hurried to the door, her hair tied loosely, a thin cardigan draped over her shoulders. When she opened it, there stood Jay, his eyes weary but resolute, holding Toby's leash in his hand. Before Emma could say anything, Toby bolted out the door with his tail wagging furiously, as if he had somehow. I knew Jamie would be there. We need to talk, Jamie said, his voice low but firm. Without waiting for her response, he stepped inside, and Toby trotted in behind him, oblivious to the weight in the air. Emma shut the door, hesitating before she took a seat across from Jamie. She clasped her hands together tightly, feeling the intensity of his gaze, not accusing but expectant, as if he were ready for whatever she had to say. Jamie, I don't know where to begin, Emma finally said, her voice shaky with uncertainty. She looked down at her hands, feeling as though every word she could muster would somehow be a lie, even if unintentionally. Jamie shook his head, the corner of his mouth lifting in a sad smile. You don't need to start, Emma. I think I've waited long enough. Emma froze as Jamie's words struck her like a bolt of lightning. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she couldn't find her voice. She had always known Jamie was important to her, always felt that their connection went beyond friendship, but she had never imagined he would say it aloud before she could respond. Toby, sensing the tension, leaped onto the couch and settled between them, his wide eyes flickering back and forth as if trying to understand. Jamie reached over and stroked Toby's head, grounding himself before he spoke again. Toby tugged on his leash out of curiosity and knocked his water bowl to the ground. Emma jumped up and knelt down to clean up the mess, her face flushed with a heat she couldn't conceal. Jimmy followed, stepping closer to her, his voice steady but vulnerable. "Emma, you don't have to answer me right now, but I need you to know that I can't keep watching you avoid what we both feel." Toby barked again, running to the door as if sensing that the moment called for an escape. Jimmy bent down, picked up the leash, and asked Emma if they could go for a walk. "Toby needs the fresh air, and maybe we do too," Emma nodded. Unable to find the words to refuse, they stepped outside, the warm sunlight spilling over the familiar path to the park. Toby bounded ahead, his tail wagging with endless enthusiasm, blissfully unaware of the heavy silence hanging between the two humans walking behind him at the park. Toby suddenly yanked at the leash, darting toward a cluster of bushes. Emma and Jamie ran after him, calling his name, but he didn't stop when they finally found him. Toby was digging furiously at the base of a large tree, determined to unearth whatever had caught his attention. They both laughed at his antics, the sound breaking through the tension. For just a moment neither noticed how close they had come to standing beside one another. Jimmy turned to Emma, his eyes reflecting a quiet determination. "Emma, I can't stay in this place where we keep pretending nothing's changed, but I won't force you. If you truly feel I'm not someone you could ever love, I'll walk away, but if there's even a small part of you that feels the same as I do, please just give us a chance." Emma felt the pain in Jim's voice, the weight of what he was asking. It wasn't just a question. It was a plea, a vulnerable offering of everything he had. Toby, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, stepped closer, resting his small head against Emma's leg. She reached down to stroke him, drawing strength from his quiet presence, then slowly looked up at Jamie. "I don't know if I can do this, Jamie." Jamie only nodded. "I'm scared, but I think I'm more scared of losing you, Emma," she murmured in a shaky voice that was full of honesty she couldn't contain. The hope in his eyes growing brighter, Toby barked, breaking the silence like a joyful exclamation point. Both Emma and Jamie looked at him, then at each other, and for the first time Emma felt that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to cross the line. They had both danced around for so many years. The sky had deepened into a dusky purple as the sun slipped below the horizon, its fading light casting long shadows through the towering trees of the park. Emma and Jamie walked slowly side by side while Toby bounded ahead, joyfully hopping around clusters of wildflowers. The cool evening air was soothing, almost enough to dissolve the tension between them, yet a heavy silence lingered, a silence neither Emma nor Jamie dared to break. They reached the familiar bench under the sprawling oak tree, a spot that had witnessed countless evenings of shared laughter and conversations. Emma sank onto the bench, gripping Toby's leash tightly as though it tethered her to something solid amidst the swirl of emotions inside her. Jamie stood before him, his posture straightening, his expression unyielding. He didn't sit down. Instead, he simply stared at her, his gaze steady and penetrating, as though willing her to lower the defenses she had spent years building. "Emma," Jimmy began, his voice soft but carrying an undeniable edge of resolve, "I need to know. I can't keep doing this. You have to give me an answer. Are you so afraid of love that you can't even give us a chance?" Emma dropped her head, her eyes evading his. Jimmy deserved the truth, but how could she possibly explain the turmoil inside her? The painful memories of betrayal, the fear of losing the one person she trusted, and the safety she had found in their friendship. All these tangled feelings collided in her mind, leaving her unsure of how to respond to Jamie. Her voice cracked, and she drew a shaky breath, summoning her courage. "I don't want to lose you." Ja's eyes softened as he sat next to her, near but not quite touching. "You're the only person who's always been there for me, the only one who makes me feel safe. But if this doesn't work, if we fail, I don't think I can bear losing even our friendship," Emma said. "Nothing hurts more than failing ever could. We have been holding back for too long, and I can't keep pretending. I don't need you to be sure, I just need you to give me one chance, even if it's the smallest one." Toby leapt onto the bench, wedging himself between them. His small head rested on Emma's lap as if trying to calm her with his silent, steadfast support. Emma looked down at him, her fingers instinctively brushing through his fur. Toby's wide, curious eyes gazed up at her, seeming to urge her forward, as though even he understood the gravity of her decision. But before Emma could answer, a distant rumble of thunder rolled through the sky. Toby's ears perked up, and with a bark, he jumped off the bench and darted toward a nearby thicket. "Toby!" Emma called, panic flaring in her voice as she scrambled to her feet. Jamie was already moving, grabbing her hand and pulling her with him. As they chased after the dog, they found Toby is on the other side of the bushes, pouring eagerly at a small hole he had dug beneath a large tree. But it wasn't just Toby's antics that caught their attention. Headlights from a car emerged in the distance, drawing closer until the vehicle came to a stop a few meters away. A man stepped out, and Emma's chest tightened as if all the air had been sucked from her lungs. The guy who had previously captured her heart and then broken it was Alex. With the same self-assurance and distance that he always possesses, Alex stood there with his eyes fixed on Emma and his lips curving into a strained smile. "Emma, it's been a long time," he said in a low, measured voice. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said. Emma instinctively retreated, her body trembling as a wave of memories hit her. Jimmy moved right away to put himself between her and Alex, adopting a protective stance, his eyes cold as they locked on the man in front of him. "What are you doing here, Jimmy?" asked, his voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "I was just passing through," Alex replied, though his eyes lingered on Emma. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." The words were simple, yet they struck Emma like a blow to the chest. There had been a time when she had longed to hear those words from Alex, a time when she thought they might heal her broken heart, but now they felt hollow, meaningless. They didn't mend the scars he had left, they only reminded her of the emptiness she had carried for so long. Jimmy turned to Emma, his expression softening but filled with concern. "Emma, let's go," he said quietly, but his tone left no room for argument. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a promise to shield her from whatever pain lingered in Alex's presence. Emma nodded, her fingers tightening around Toby's leash. The three of them turned away, leaving Alex standing alone in the fading light. Yet even as they walked back toward the bench, the weight of old wounds still clung to Emma's chest, refusing to let go. When they reached the bench, Emma sank down onto it once more, her body heavy with exhaustion, not from the chase but from the storm raging inside her. Jamie sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers. His touch was warm, grounding her in the present, pulling her away from the shadows of the past. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt the faint stirrings of clarity. "Jamie," she whispered, lifting her eyes to meet this, "I'm scared, but I think I can't keep letting fear hold me back anymore." Jamie's hand tightened around theirs, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You don't have to be scared, Emma, we'll face it together as long as you trust me." Toby settled at their feet, his tail wagging softly as though offering his own silent approval, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emma felt the weight lifting from her chest, the chains of her doubt and fear beginning to loosen. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she believed she wouldn't have to face it alone. Jimmy and Toby would be there, steadfast, unwavering, and this time she was ready to let love in. The night had fully settled over the park, enveloping it in a serene quietness. Only the faint rustling of the wind through the trees and the soft padding of Emma and Jay's footsteps could be heard ahead of them. Toby trotted with a steady wag of his tail, the glow of the street lights casting a golden shimmer on his. For Emma, she walked slowly, her thoughts swirling, the echoes of the evening's events still reverberating in her mind. But with every step Jamie took beside her, she felt a quiet steadiness, a rhythm that grounded her amidst the chaos in her heart. They returned to Emma's small home, the porch light spilling its warm glow over the steps. Toby dashed through the open door, making a beeline for his water bowl as though nothing unusual had transpired. Emma lingered on the threshold, hesitating for a moment before turning to face Jay. He stood just outside, his hand still gripping Toby's leash, his gaze soft but full of quiet anticipation. In that moment, Emma realized she didn't need more explanations nor more time to think. What she needed was to move forward, to step into the space where Jess stood waiting. "Jamie," she said softly, her voice barely louder than the night breeze, "I think I've been wrong all this time. I allowed fear to rule me, but now I realize that I don't want to lose you, never." Jim's eyes brightened as if her words were the ones he had been waiting to hear all of his life. He stepped onto the porch and closed the distance between them with deliberate ease. His smile was warm, steady, and full of reassurance. Emma said, "You won't ever lose me. I've been here from the beginning, and I'll be here always." Emma didn't wait any longer. She stepped forward, feeling the warmth radiating from him as he reached for her hand. His touch was light, a final silent reassurance, and all the barriers she had erected over the years vanished in that moment. There was no fear, no shadow of the past, just the two of them finally aligning in a way they were always meant to. When Jimmy pulled her into an embrace, Emma felt the world around her still. She closed her eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her cheek, a heartbeat that promised he would never leave her side. At their feet, Toby sat wagging his tail with unstrained enthusiasm, as though he understood that everything had finally fallen into place. They sat together on the porch steps, side by side, Toby curling up at their feet. The night air carried the faint scent of wildflowers from the nearby fields, and the moonlight bathed them in its soft glow. Emma glanced at Jamie, and for the first time in years she smiled, a real smile free of hesitation or worry. "You know," she said, her voice warm under the light of the stars, "Toby was the first being in my life that I trusted completely, and now you're the second." Jimmy chuckled, a low, comforting sound, and he reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Then I promise, Emma, I'll never let you down." They sat in silence, their gazes drifting to the night sky above, letting the quiet stretch comfortably between. Then Toby let out a soft sigh, his breathing calm and steady as though he too was content with the peace that had finally settled for the first time in what felt like forever. Emma felt no fear, no need to hide. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, a journey unknown. But this time she wouldn't face it alone. Jamie and Toby would always be there, a constant presence, a promise she could finally believe in. And in that tranquil moment, under the starry sky, Emma felt the first stirrings of something new: hope, love, and the knowledge that this was the beginning of a chapter unlike any she had ever known, a chapter of togetherness, of unwavering trust, and of footsteps that would forever walk side by side.